أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Dr. Suzy Ismail from Cornerstone, and in today's episode of Ramadan Resilience, we're going to focus on better understanding anxiety, better understanding fear, and relating it back to how it impacts our lives. So we started out our program by focusing on the verse from the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah where Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that we will be tested. And that one of the tests that we will experience is the test of al-khawf, of fear. And it's interesting to note that that is one of the very first tests that Allah Azza wa Jal puts before us in our understanding of the tests and tribulations that we will encounter. Now we understand that the tests that Allah Azza wa Jal tests us with are also a blessing. And we know that the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Amr al-mu'min gharib, that the situation of the believer is strange. If something befalls the believer that he perceives as good, he says Alhamdulillah. And if something befalls the believer that he perceives as difficult or testing or a trial, he still says Alhamdulillah. And we say Alhamdulillah because we know that our tests can be a form of purification and they can also be a form of strength. Strengthening our resolve, strengthening our iman, strengthening our character, strengthening our sense of self and our understanding of just how we can get through things through the grace and the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. So let's talk about al-khawf and understanding what that means. We have all experienced fear of some sort in our lives, and that fear can be rooted to ourselves. Maybe it's a fear of not being good enough. Maybe it's a fear of not succeeding. Maybe it's a fear of, interactions. It could be a fear that's rooted in the unknown, the uncertainty of the future. Maybe you're afraid of, what's going to happen next? How am I going to finish college? How am I going to get married? How are my children going to turn out? Am I going to have children? Things that are related to the dunya, unanswered questions. And all of these unanswered questions can lead to fear. Now, many times we are quick to label fear, and to label fear with the label of saying, I have anxiety, or I experience anxiety. But it's important for us to note that anxiety as a state of being has different forms, or it really manifests itself in different ways. Someone could be experiencing an anxious episode. And most of us in life have experienced an anxious episode, which is something that is often temporary, where we are responding to situationally stressing types of things that are occurring. So it may be that we have situational anxiety, meaning specific situations may cause an anxious episode. And an anxious episode may look like something that's physically occurring to our bodies. So sometimes we confuse panic attacks to anxious episode. A panic attack can often be something that is contained, and it can occur sometimes in a 10-minute increment, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, it can last an hour. Oftentimes with a panic attack, the physiological symptoms that appear would be the shaking of hands, the beating of the heart very quickly. Many times people feel that they're having a seizure, and this can, in many cases, be a panic attack. With anxiety, a lot of times, it's more of a mental type of response that we have, where mentally our mind begins to speed up and we are terrified of everything that might happen. And with all the question marks that we have about what might happen, that situational anxiety that may occur in specific situations, like social anxiety when we're meeting someone for the first time, testing anxiety when we're taking an exam, many times if we leave those untreated, they can grow into clinical anxiety. Clinical or chronic anxiety is an anxiety that never leaves us. It's always there. That fear, that khawf that we're tested with is constantly in the back of our minds. And so we are afraid for so many different things, and it's not just things that we can label. Sometimes it's just an emotion of fear that overtakes us. So it's difficult sometimes when we experience maybe a panic attack or an anxious episode. We may be tempted to self-diagnose. We may go onto WebMD and try to say, oh, this is what I have. And it's important for us not to fall into that pitfall of self-diagnosis. There are resources out there that can help us through this journey, that can help us identify what we're experiencing and help us know how to treat it. So I hope that you will continue with us in these episodes throughout Ramadan, where we're not just going to talk about what the problem is, but we're also going to identify the solutions and how we can start implementing strategies and approaches that help us through these difficulties. Jazakum Allahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum.